I'd like to welcome everybody to The Shadow of Truth with your host, Dave Kranzler from the investmentresearchdynamics.com and Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org. And we have on the line today as our special guest, Mr. Bill Murphy from lametropolecafe.com and gata.org. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk really quickly about this Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, because it's, to me, the fact that Israel is jumping ship from the U.S. and joining it tells me it's a game changer for the U.S. The conversation about what just happened with the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, which, for people who may not know, listening, who may not know what it is, it's basically it's a big development bank, I guess, sort of akin to the World Bank, that China has founded and funded, and its initial mission is to invest $100 billion in infrastructure projects across Asia. Apparently, China already has budgeted $50 billion of that $100 billion, and immediately the United States resisted the AIIB, and it also was putting heavy pressure on its European and non-European allies to not join the bank. Well, of course, for whatever reason you want to attribute it to, all of the European countries, or major European countries, including the UK, have joined the bank. And the U.S. has expressed heavy consternation over that. And just yesterday, it was announced that Israel had filed an application to join the bank. And Israel and Japan have probably been the U.S.'s most ardent allies. Japan clearly is a lapdog for the U.S., but to me, I thought it was potentially a game changer for the U.S. in the sense that it really speaks to the U.S.'s declining ability to influence world events and to influence its allies or direct its allies according to its will. I think it really represents a rapid deterioration in the United States political and economic power around the globe. And what I found very, very funny, for lack of a better word, was that Treasury Secretary Jack Lew said earlier in the week that, quote, Washington would welcome the AIIB as long as it complements existing institutions and adopts high governance standards. Now, where does he have any ground to stand on when it comes to high governance standards when the United States financial system and the United States political system is probably the most corrupt systems in the history of the world? So here's this guy trying to, it's one of these, do as I say, not as I do. If everyone else behaves in the way that we want them to behave, then we can take the most advantage of them. And that's what that statement says. And I think the rest of the world is finally catching on to this and getting sick of it. And we're seeing our allies and our former military partners, including a bunch of NATO members, all of a sudden start to move towards China. And I think it's a game changer for the U.S. And the only thing that worries me about this is that, in that the U.S. is becoming increasingly isolated from the rest of the world, I think it also makes the U.S. more dangerous. Because as I wrote in my blog post last night about this, a trapped rat will attack the person who's cornered it. And I'm afraid that may be where this is headed eventually.
Well, I mean, it sounds like we're going to have to, not we, but the United States military industrial complex is going to have to start dropping bombs, because now we have no allies, and like you said, completely trapped, totally isolated. No one wants to play by the criminal rules anymore. And the financial system, the United States financial system, as you rightly said, is probably the most corrupt in the history of the world. And the fact that Jack Lew, who is one of the criminal
operatives,
thank you, excuse me, for him to come out and make that kind of a statement is just a joke.
It's a complete joke. I laughed when I saw that. I'm like, what? Are you kidding?
Well, I mean, imagine how the, Schabel over in Germany, his response, or, the finance minister in France or Italy or Australia or Israel, how they responded to that is like, hello, what about Eric Holder and your so-called Department of Justice and the lack of regulations and the lack of oversight and the SEC and allowing the rigging of all the markets, the plunge protection team, the president's working group on markets. I mean, my goodness, that system that team in itself is a criminal rigging of the markets. And if you and I know that, everybody in the world knows that. Everybody that has half a brain. And I would assume that these finance ministers of these countries and these nation states know this. So,
yes, absolutely. They know it, and I mean, it's really I mean, the U.S. is a collapsing shell of a country. It's a giant debt-ridden Ponzi scheme, and everyone sees it. And you're starting to see that the rest of the world is being attracted to the economic powerhouse that China's developing into. And the important point is the fact that it's what it is and what it represents, and the fact that it's in direct competition with the World Bank, which the U.S. controls, and that's why the U.S. opposes this. And as Reuters points out in their article yesterday, Japan and United States are the two notable absentee countries from the AIIB, and I think that kind of says it all right there. Well, what do you think? Should we bring on Bill Murphy?
I think Mr. Murphy would be a great asset to this conversation. I mean, he is the co-founder and chairman of GATA, and he publishes the nightly Midas report on lametropolecafe.com. And that is a subscription-based website. So let's get Mr. Murphy on and see what's on his mind.
All right, let's do that. So Rory and I just finished up a conversation about the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, and we noticed today that after a nice move in gold and silver yesterday, gold and silver were hit today, and we were just wondering what your take on that was.
That's the same old crud, to be honest with you. I mean, you've seen it a zillion times as I have. I mean, you had a great moves in gold yesterday, and then silver followed late. As soon as the access market opens, they take gold down $5. Silver, which was the leader on the way down, yet again, it's an indicator that the bad guys, the gold cartel uses, was down 15 cents. Within 6 minutes of COMEX trading, from last night till today, over the prior close, every bit of silver's gain of yesterday was lost. And then it went down worse than that as the day went on. It is so obvious, and this is what gets me. No one ever talks about it. It was started at 3 a.m. New York time again this morning. They must attack gold or stop it from rallying, 3 out of 5 days. I mean, they keep doing the same old things, and this goes on and on.
What's interesting to me, and I didn't know this until this morning, but India was closed today, and they're also closed tomorrow, and that kind of removed a very strong physical presence in the market overnight. And it always seems like what happens is that gold will rally while Asia and India, the Asian and Indian markets, are open, and those are what I consider to be the true physical markets in the world. And then as soon as the Shanghai market closes, which is the last of the real Asian markets to be open during the night, London opens up, and all of a sudden gold gets hit again, and it's the same pattern every single night.
Exactly. And again, you're talking about it. I know you're well aware of it, but where's the rest of the world on this? It must have happened 1,300 times now. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
Well, hey, at least the CFTC is cracking down on the wheat futures manipulation by Kraft Foods.
Yeah, this whole thing it's if it wasn't such made it so tough on the people in the gold silver world, it's almost comical. I mean, you've got all these big banks being fined for every market in the world and currencies and LIBOR and energy and mortgages and now again wheat. It's every market is messed with or manipulated, rigged, but gold and silver. It's pathetic. I mean, if people can't get it, and quite frankly, my opinion is that it's because the United States government and the other big banks, central banks in the world, the BIS are involved. So it's much bigger than the law, so to speak.
I would agree with that. I wanted to circle back really quickly because you kind of zeroed in on silver, and obviously the manipulation is easier to see in the silver market because the silver market's a lot smaller, it's not as liquid, and it's easier for them to push around. And it usually seems like if they can get a sell-off going in silver, gold will follow because of the correlation factor there. You and I have discussed over the past several months that we think there may be a bigger problem in the physical silver market for them than in the gold market. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, as many people know, I'm a big Eric Sprott fan. He thinks silver is going over $100, and I believe him. And Eric and David Morgan, who knows the silver market as well or better than anybody, they can't figure out where the supply is coming from. I talk to John Embry about it all the time. We don't know, but I think behind the scenes it is really tight for them. They're almost maniacal by the way they go after silver. And when it blows, I think it's going to blow sky high and go up much faster than it did in 2011. But honestly, there's no sign of it yet. Right now, the open interest yesterday on the move up went up 1,600 contracts. Gold only went up 300. And sure enough, they killed it again today. And that high open interest has been a bearish indicator for silver for 4 years now. I mean, it's sort of a joke because with the cost of, with the price so much below the cost of general production, it's almost ludicrous if the open interest would be this high. But it is. It remains that way, and it remains bearish.
Do you think?
Not that I'm bearish on silver, but anytime we try to buck it, we go in the tank.
Do you think that the open interest is an indication of people just being worn out by the manipulation, being sick of it, and just not and understanding that if I go into this market that I'm going to lose money? I mean, I would think that after 4 years that would play a part. What do you think?
Yeah, well, in a normal market, in a free market, the open interest would have dribbled down to nothing where everybody got disgusted and went away, and that was the end of it. But because it's so rigged by Morgan and the rest of the crowd, that they staying there, as again, use the word, James McShirley's word, one of our guys, it's maniacal the way they're going after this thing. And yet there are players that because they see an Eric Sprott move coming, continue to stay in the game. And they keep getting their butt handed to them. But they're playing for that move to 100, and nothing really has changed yet. And the bad guys and the gold cartel, they just stick with it and pounce on it, and they're able to get away with it. And at some point, it's going to change just dramatically. And do I think we're close to being there? Yes, but I've thought that before.
One of the things that I've always thought, and it's impossible to prove, and it's impossible to prove by design, is that I think that the GLD and SLV trusts are their source of physical gold and silver right now. And especially for silver, I mean, if you look at from the time that SLV was started until now, I mean, on paper, it's accumulated a massive amount of silver. I mean, it's by far the largest holder of physical silver above the ground in the world. And so it's my view that they use silver from the SLV trust to make their physical delivery commitments to the long side of the silver contracts who actually want the silver. Because obviously silver, what is it, something like 70% of the silver that's produced in any given year is used in industrial processes. Is that what the number is?
I'm not sure, but I know what you. I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. It stunk from high heaven to begin with when JPM, the Big Short, becomes the custodian, of the big silver ETF, and then same with HSBC being doing the same in gold.
Yes. And the other interesting thing is that JP Morgan is obviously the custodian of SLV. It's also by far the largest trader and market maker and custodian of the COMEX and COMEX silver. And a lot of people aren't even aware of this, but the vault for SLV was originally established in London. And then, I don't know, maybe around 2010, I think, they changed the prospectus so that the COMEX could also vault SLV silver. And my view on that was that it allowed JP Morgan an easier avenue for moving silver in and out of the SLV trust as it needed it to make deliveries.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, these are very sophisticated people, and they would go to any length to get any inside handle and ability to do what they're doing. Something has to be being done that way because of the way the market's traded and what they've done, and where, again, the smartest guys I know regarding the silver market can't figure out where it's all coming from to keep the price this low. So they figured out a way to do it, and they're continuing to get the job done.
Right. One thing I thought would be interesting, Bill, is a lot of our listeners might not be familiar with GATA, and I thought maybe you could talk about you were one of the co-founders of it and the chairman of GATA. I thought maybe you could talk about, the history of GATA and what inspired you to get this organization going, because it's clearly been the pioneer and the leader in terms of exposing the gold and silver manipulation since the late 1990s.
Well, thank you very much. In 1998, I've traded futures. I've been around in my whole career basically, and was a limited position trader at some point. So I know something about futures trading. And when long-term capital management blew up, I was just started my website in the Metropole Cafe, and noticed that all the bullion banks were all coming in and stopping the price above 300. Well, anyway, long story short, realized they were rigging the market and protecting their positions, via exposure to long-term capital management or whatever. And I was complaining about it all the time. And Chris Powell was a member of my websites. He was sick and tired of hearing me complain. So let's do something about it. So we formed GATA. We both put in $500. Initially, we thought it was the bullion banks, but then we realized it was much bigger than that it was the Fed, the Treasury, Exchange Stabilization Fund, BIS, and it was much, much bigger than we thought. And to try to win the day, and as you said, we started it to expose this thing, as you said. We've had 4 international conferences in South Africa, the Yukon, Washington, and fabulous one in London in 2011. We've been to Washington many times. We've had all kinds of letter campaigns in the past. We've done our best to get exposure on TV. Chris was just on CNBC, Chris Powell, in Asia. I was on CNBC in February of 1999, and once they heard what I had to say, I've been banned ever since. That's a long time. That's a long time to be banned.
Well, that means you're doing something right.
We think so, but boy, it's sort of pitiful. There's no free press. We were told by a well-known writer that he couldn't ask questions to central banks; he'd be fired. I think, Dave, just the other day you mentioned, a Bloomberg Gold can't mention anything positive about gold. Well, that same reporter Claudia Carpenter told John Embry, Chris Powell, and I in London that she's not allowed to mention GATA. Chris done a great job sending stuff to the press. They refused to print it. It's astounding that it's that big a story, and they're that afraid of the people behind this thing that nobody will allow it to be discussed publicly in the mainstream.
Just kind of as a follow-up to that, because I knew about the Claudia Carpenter situation, the same person who told me what Claudia Carpenter told him in the mid '90s about not being given explicit directions from her senior people at Bloomberg to never follow up on any positive news in the gold market. He also told me that one of the writers for the Financial Times told him that his bosses at the Financial Times specifically told this reporter to never talk about gold in a positive light or talk about gold manipulation. So it's clearly it's not a conspiracy theory. It's fact. There's definitely an anti-gold mentality that's been adopted not only by the banks and the central banks and the governments, but also in the media.
That's correct. It's all connected, and Chris Powell, my colleague, has done a great job of putting all kinds of evidence together and documenting about of what's being said, by some of these big institutions like the BIS and so on, and it's there for everybody to see and connect. And if you saw the way these markets trade and what gold has done, and for crying out loud, if it had just kept pace with inflation, the price of gold would be at least more than double what it is today. That's how bad it is.
When you first started out, did you ever connect the fact that the reason that they're manipulating the price of gold like this is because gold is kind of the antichrist, for, if you will, for fiat currency? And so if they let the price of gold rise, every dollar the price of gold goes up, it invalidates the U.S. dollar by a dollar.
The U.S. dollar and all kinds of things. I always refer to gold as a barometer or thermometer of U.S. financial market health. I mean, just think about it. Every time if gold's screaming higher, what are the headlines? It's always bad for the money, power, politicians. It's about inflation. It's about negativity for the dollar. It's about a crisis of some sort. And so they like to keep it subdued and out of the domain and keep it quiet. And that's why they've made such a concentrated, calculated effort over all these years. And for crying out loud, the price was fixed in the 60s. I mean, it's not like you have to go to a big stretch to understand that, what they're trying to do here. It just makes common sense. And all I can say is that John Embry and I were speaking with my old colleague, Frank Veneroso, who wrote the Gold Book in 1997. And all of a sudden, Frank realized he was talking a little bit like the way a Gada would, and he realized his phone was being tapped. And ever since then, he's told us it's much bigger than we even think, and he won't talk about it again.
And this is the guy that's had meetings with every central bank in the world and is an advisor and a consultant to central banks. So if anyone knows how the insides of these central banks work, it's him.
That's right. I mean, Frank was a consultant to the World Bank. I mean, and all kinds of people. And he, he's been over to the Middle East and knows these situations well. He got his information from the Gold Book, and that's how we found out the gold loans by the central banks were much, much higher than reported, from a guy named Terry Smeaton at the Bank of England. And it was a private conversation that Frank was able to use these numbers. Of course, Smeaton was horrified later when we came out with inflation stuff. But these were facts, and this kind of stuff is not reported by the establishment. They refuse to put out the right demand numbers for gold because they can't account for the central bank supply that's coming to suppress the price from the central banks. And this has been going on since GATA's been started, and it's just surfaced recently because they made the demand for China way less than it really is, according to Koos Janssen, does great work. And that's the same as it was in the late 1990s when we started. So the one thing for sure, they have really got to be going through a lot of their available supply to keep doing what they're doing. I just don't see how it can go on too much longer. Do
you think that the new fix coming out of Shanghai is going to maybe give us some relief? Because that's coming up in September, October timeframe this year.
Well, you certainly hope so. As Dave was talking earlier, that India and China are the real movers and shakers here, and as their influence becomes grows in terms of actually pricing the stuff, it can't hurt. I mean, I just can't wait for one of these bullish things that we always talk about to manifest itself. I mean, none of them ever do. No matter what it is, and I mean, reading Dave's stuff every day and working like I do on the subject, we think something big is happening, and there's probably some big issues behind the scenes, but none of these things kick in. And I think they will overnight when we least expect it. But man, the life's going by here.
So I guess maybe just to kind of wrap things up here, I'm just curious, when do you think the cartel's going to lose control of the paper market? And do you think that we'll be able to see it coming before it happens? Because I've always kind of envisioned it that one of these nights we'll go to bed and we'll wake up and gold will be up $200 and it'll be bid without an offer. I mean, do you think there will be any kind of indicators that we can watch so that we might be able to see this coming? Or do you think it's just going to be one of those things where it's going to happen when people least expect it?
Well, of course, it's all guesswork, but yeah, I think it's going to come out of nowhere, and it's going to be explosive, and everything will have changed, and it will be when, as I call it, this gold cartel just can't do it anymore, or something surfaces that just completely overwhelms them. And yes, I think I refer to something like Newton's law. For every action, an equal and opposite reaction, and because of what they've done here these past years has been so egregious and so, sustained and relentless that when it blows, it's going to be violent. So yeah, the odds are that it'll be something we wake up one day and everything has changed. And that's one reason we hang in there, and I try to keep all the people that follow what I do in there, because that's the kind of thing that will happen. And it's going to be very tough if you're not on board for people that get out around these levels to pay up big time. And that's when the momentum players will move in and make a fortune. And guys that don't stay with the program will miss the move. I know this is what happened in the 70s to a lot of people. They all got tired and got out. And then the big move came and they were no longer there. I've been told that by some of the legends of in the industry that were around back then. So we have a lot of excitement coming, and I think the price is going to go bonkers, but it'll be when they lose control, and then it's off to the races. And so we have a lot to look forward to, but it's been a grind of late, and we ought to be in the process of changing right now. But the proof will be in the pudding and in the price action, and we'll see soon enough.
Speaking of the work that you do, Bill, I've always said I've been a subscriber to La Metropole Cafe, I think probably since 2003. And I've always just been amazed at the amount of energy and time that you're able to put into this thing. I mean, it's almost like you're inexhaustible. Can you just tell the listeners where they can get access to La Metropole Cafe and the Midas Report?
Yeah, it's lametropolecafe.com, LEMETROPOLACAFE.com, and they can sign up for a 2-week free trial and see if it's of value. It's as simple as that, really. And if they want to get to hear about what my colleague Chris Powell has to say, he has a free GATA list, and they can go to GATA.org and sign up on there. And Chris does a great job. I said he just spent a few weeks over in Asia, spreading the GATA gospel, and we're still out there doing what we can.
One of the things that I've always said is that I don't see how anyone can invest and participate in the precious metals market without subscribing to the Midas Report. It's an invaluable tool, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate it, and I know I really enjoy doing it, and what else would I do anyway?
Go to the bar and chase women, I guess.
No comment.
Hey, Bill, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you guys for what you're doing, and boy, good to talk to you, and Dave, finally to chat with you, and I look forward to doing it again sometime. And
Absolutely.
let's just hope that we get a surprise here or there that lasts.
That would be
Well,
nice.
you and I both kind of independently concluded. I remember we shared emails maybe a week ago where we both kind of felt independently that something was going to happen in the near future. And I couldn't put a finger on it, but that was just my gut feeling.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, what we need is a day like yesterday and then a bigger one today instead of this nonsense that we get over and over again.
I agree.
If there's nothing else there, gentlemen, I guess we'll bid a fond farewell and talk with you soon there, Mr. Murphy.
Yep. And a happy Easter, happy Passover, and we'll take a few days off.
Thanks, Bill. Hey, and listen, Bill, anytime you want, ping me on Skype here.
Will do.
We'll speak to you soon. We definitely want to have you back on.
Yes, sir.
Look forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Speak to you later, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Okay.